Hello and welcome to my new Artisan Living playlist on this YouTube channel. I'm Marie-Nicole for those of you who don't know me. I do have a podcast on this channel which is called A Life by Design, but I'm an artisan, a creator, a maker of things by hand, and I wanted to start a new playlist to share with you the journey of being an artisan, and which I have been for, officially business wise for 17 years. I've had an artisanal business. However, I have been making since I was a child, and I have infused my life with handcrafted items. And so I thought it would be really fun to do a channel where I actually share the journey as I'm going through new things, starting new projects, experimenting, and even just sharing the lifestyle of being an artisan. Outside of my artisanal work, I'm also a coach. I support people in content creation and their digital presence online. So I do that through a program, a government funded program, and I also coach people with my embodiment coaching service so that people actually can connect back to the essence of who they are. But the videos in this playlist are going to be really focused on the activities that take place as a part of being an artisan and living in that way. So, where I'm actually shooting this from is my studio shed, and this is the latest version of my workshop. So in this introductory video, I want to go back to almost the beginning, not quite the beginning because I don't have footage right from the very start to share, but I will share some footage from when I first moved to this region in the Yass Valley in New South Wales, Australia. And before that, I'd moved from the Central Coast, and I was in Sydney when I started my first business as a photographer 25 years ago in the inner west of Sydney. Then when I had my first child, we moved to the Central Coast. So when I was on the Central Coast, I had my second child, I ceased being a full-time photographer and I actually started my artisanal business. And he was only 6 months old at the time, and he is now 17. And then about 15 years ago, it's almost 15 years, we moved to this region. I set up my first studio in the cottage that we were renting at the time on a farm in a shed, not dissimilar to this, except for the fact that it didn't have doors and it was freezing. It was in a valley that got really icy of a morning and it was absolutely freezing. And there were sheep and cattle on the farm that used to actually come into my studio, and that wasn't very practical for screen printing. So I ended up ceasing the screen printing and transitioning to working with old blankets and kangaroo leather. And that's really where I started to amplify my production as an artisan professionally. And so that little studio had a fireplace in it and it had a beautiful big window. And I set my industrial machine in front of that window and I'd look out over the dam. And it was a beautiful space to really hone the craft of having an artisanal business as an income stream. And then we moved from there to another small cottage on another farm, which was the first farm was 500 acres. That was our introductory to living in the country on the land. And that was intentional to actually experience what an operating farm was like before buying our own land. And then we moved to another property, which was 3,500 acres. And there was a small cottage that we rented there. And that was about 40 minutes out of town. So I had, again, a studio set up, and I traveled to trade to markets and I sold online for many years. But I did actually find it very challenging out there on this large property where there was only, at most, there was probably five or maybe, at most, there would have been 8 people on the property. And then, but on average, it was myself, the farmer, and a farmhand. And this 3,500 acre property took 15 minutes to drive across. So the farmer and the farmhand were, anywhere across the property. And I, most of the time, was on my own. I don't even think we had, oh yeah, we had a cat. So we had a cat only at that time. So I did have a pet, but we didn't have a dog. Our dog actually had passed away. Our little dog had passed away that we'd brought down from the city to the country on the first farm we lived on, and we hadn't yet got another dog. So it was Gypsy and I out there on our own most of the time, and I used to walk around the property, and it was beautiful. I loved that. However, I did find it very isolating. And so I did end up traveling to trade a lot more while I was there and would go away for weekends. And we got a vintage caravan. And we used to go up to Newcastle, out to Orange, and everywhere in between. And we did lots of traveling for my trade. And I sold online. And then 10 years ago, we bought this property, and it's a small acreage. It's 2 acres, and it's a cottage on the hill on the edge of a village. And it's got a beautiful vista. It looks out over the western setting sun. And there are two of these sheds on the property. And so one of them became my studio shed, but not immediately. At first, I had my studio as what we now call the Zen Den. It's a little room in the back. It's an enclosed veranda, and it's one of the smallest rooms in the house. And that initially was my studio. So I do have photos of productivity that took place in that tiny little space, but it worked okay. And I also took over the dining room when necessary. However, it didn't take long to kind of outgrow that space, and that's why I set this studio shed up. But I still did suffer from the isolation aspect because my husband at the time was working in town, my kids went to school in town, and I was out here on my own most of the time. I did have a friend who came and worked for me 1 day a week, and she would come work in the shed, or we'd work inside if it was too cold in the shed. And that was before we got the fireplace. So I put a little fireplace in here, and that's made a big difference. And I also had hessian that lined the ceiling, but in recent, or maybe about 6 months ago, a possum decided to take up residence in the shed, and it destroyed the hessians. So I've pulled that down, and I've actually removed the possum's nest, and so it doesn't live in here anymore, poor little possum. But it yeah. Anyway, it has the temperature variation is quite significant out in the shed. But I do love the timber, the exposed timber, and the corrugated iron roof. I do like that look. So anyway, the whole point of sharing this with you is to so that's what I was going to tell you. So then I opened up a commercial space about maybe a year or two after moving into this house and having this shed set up. I opened up a commercial space in the town of Yass, which was quite a large space. I had a small one first, a small introductory space, which I had two women who joined me in there to work out of there as creative co-working, and I sold on behalf of maybe 5 or 6 other people at that point in the space itself. I sold on behalf of other artisans. And then about a year after that, I moved into the bigger premises, which was an old heritage building. And that was the next step of my business plan. I had a 10-year business plan that I had created while I was here in this shed. I took on a graduate certificate and studied collective entrepreneurship. And prior to that, I had done Marie Folio's B School because I really wanted to build a business that was supportive not only for myself, but for other makers and designers in the region and even beyond who spent a lot of their time working alone. And so we had a place to connect and to support each other. And so I opened up this big space which was 125 square meters for the actual hall, and it was upstairs in a heritage building. And then there was a back room that we ran workshops out of, and then there was a kitchenette with lockers, and it was a beautiful space and a big veranda that we could also host events on. And so I was in that space for 5 years, and the smaller space before that for a year. So for 6 years, I operated out of a commercial space in town, which was amazing. And this shed became like the boys' play space. So we had a foosball table out here. We've got darts. We had instruments set up out here, and they loved the fireplace and sofas and the armchairs. And yeah, anyway, it was a great play space. But then after my marriage ended, after 24 years of being married, I had my commercial space open for another year, and then couldn't maintain that as well as the property and the house. So I ended up closing that commercial space, and I am back working from my shed again. Now, I don't do my artisanal work full time. I was full time when I was in the commercial space, and prior to that, when I was traveling to trade. But while I was in that commercial space, I started my coaching service. And so since moving back home, with my work, I have built up my coaching practice, but artisanal living is just a part of who I am. So it is very hard to let go of making, and making as an income stream is something that I have really had to contemplate whether or not I would continue, because now we've got this property on the market to sell, and so I don't know if I will have a space as big as this to work from when I move, but I'm making the most of it while I still do. And so that's why I thought I would start this channel, where I get to share with you the activities of what I create and what I play and experiment with, and also what happens next, where I'm going to move to next, and what that's going to look like as an artisan who is absolutely passionate about handcrafting and creating, not just to sell, but for my everyday living experience and uses. So I have lots of products that I have made, or lots of items, I should say, that I have made that I don't actually sell. I've just made them for my own use. And so they are the types of things that I'd like to share with you through this channel. And so that's why I thought I would start a playlist devoted to artisan living, because I really do believe that the magic of living is in our everyday experiences. It's not just about the big exciting experiences that we wait for and work towards. It is in the little things every day. So as an example, I am just about to go and pour my tea here. I have made myself a lemongrass and ginger tea with a beautiful honey that I picked up on the south coast. And I have this cup here, which I'll bring over and show you soon, which is handcrafted by a maker in this region. And so I've had this tea infusing while I've been waiting to record this. And so this cup here is actually by Helen Cathell from Good Hope Pottery. And it's a design that she was testing out with the facets. And the actual glaze is not a glaze that they normally use. Like this colouring, it's quite metallic. You probably can't see it very well on that on the screen, but it's a beautiful chocolate colour, and it's very textural, the actual glaze itself. And yeah, it's got this metallic fleck to it. So I love this cup for my lemongrass and ginger tea. Now, my lemongrass and ginger tea, the lemongrass is actually a plant that we have here that we grow. And every time I cook with lemongrass, I actually keep the greens, the tops, and I put them in a basket. And I've got muslin over the top of the basket in the larder, which I'll share with you that process another time. Because I do the same for creating my own rose powder, rose sprinkles. I wouldn't call it powder because I don't grind it down to a fine powder. I like to have a texture to it. And I have a big basket that I dry the petals in, and they're from roses that are growing here on the property. I've got 50 roses on the property that I inherited. I didn't plant them. They came with the place. But I harvest the petals and I dry the petals, and then I blend them up to create rose sprinkles, and that's really beautiful. So I started doing the same with the lemongrass. I've started actually drying the lemongrass for my own tea, and it's little things like that and having it in a beautiful cup like this, which makes my days magical. And so while I am back here most of the time working on my own, I do now connect with more people through the virtual space, through my coaching, and I do actually travel out of here, and I haven't done as many markets or festivals, but I have done some, which is keeping me in contact with other artisans. And I've made friends who are artisan designers in different regions that I spend time with. And that's a really beautiful way to stay connected to the outside world. But most of the time, I'm here with my two dogs and my cat, and the chickens you can hear in the background are actually my neighbours, but we used to have quite a few poultry on the property. We used to actually have the ducks and a lot of chickens and guinea fowl and geese. And so I have been working with feathers for many years. Even before we had our own poultry, I started collecting feathers from other people and would make things. So in my earrings that I'm wearing today, I've got tawny frogmouth feathers, and I pick up roadkill and I actually clean the bird. I actually I should say I go through the process of sterilizing the feathers because I've processed my own meat birds, which I did as a child. In That's how my family, that's how I was raised, and my former husband and I actually did that. We intentionally wanted to live off the land, which is why we moved to the country, and we raised our own meat birds. And we always wanted our birds to be happy birds, not to be confined. We have quite a big yard well, several yards. We've got 3 yards that poultry ended up roaming in. And so I collected the feathers from our meat birds and I started handcrafting with them, and from other people around the region who donated feathers to me. So that again is a part of the reason for this playlist, is to share the process of using what's available to you to create what you desire and what adds magic to your days. And so this vest is a good example of that. I wear a kangaroo fur vest, which is actually sourced from the National Parks and Wildlife Harvesting Program. So it is a tannery that gets the skins from the harvesting, from the maintenance of numbers in the population in the national parks, and they're vegetable tanned. But the reason I started working with kangaroo leather is, I've just spilt my tea on there. Take a sip. But the reason I started working with kangaroo leather is because when I lived on farms, I actually witnessed in the region a lot of culling and dumping, and kangaroos that just ended up being dumped into gullies. And I thought that's really quite wasteful. And so I started working with the material in a way that I could then sell the products made from it. First, I made this vest for just me because I did a lot of markets and there was a lot of setting up very early in the morning in the cold, and being able to reach up and put things up and put a marquee up without ripping the sleeve on a coat, which I had done previously, was why I made a vest. And then I could also take layers off underneath the vest and have the vest over the top of a singlet and still be quite comfortable, being a natural fiber. So these are the elements to the way of living that I have established over many years. And so me making this vest for my own needs ended up being something that other people asked me constantly at market stalls and then in the shop. And then when I was out and about wearing my vest, if I would make them to order. So I did. I started making them to order. But prior to that, I was working with kangaroo leather to make things like, so this is one of my bag designs that I make. I also made a clutch purse version and a smaller satchel. And again, all kangaroo and lined in linen and all handcrafted. Now, I make a range of products that not just out of kangaroo, I also use cowhide. And this here is a notebook cover that I've made with a book strap. The little pouch is actually kangaroo. I've made a range of little pouches, and that pouch has the pencil sharpener in it with shaving. So on the run, I can sharpen my pencils. And so, yeah, these I make to order. And I also, with cowhide, used to make a lot of cuffs and make watch cuffs to order. So the main cuff is cowhide, and the little attachments there for the watch face are actually kangaroo. And then I've got this kangaroo leather lacing strap, and so many things. But I used to sell on behalf of other artisans, like the recycled copper scarf tie that I'm wearing, and even the recycled copper cuffs that I wear because I work with my hands a lot, and my ring. They're made by a maker, two makers actually, a husband and wife team in Braidwood. And my earrings I've made out of not only the tawny frogmouth feathers, but this copper wire. I got this from the copper from a friend who I used to sell on behalf of through the shop as well, and he works with recycled fencing wire and makes sculptures and chandeliers. And so we met at a market, and so did the recycled copper jeweler and I. We met at a market. We used to trade alongside of each other regularly. But So these are the types of people that I have become friends with over many years through doing markets, and I love that aspect. And we're all very passionate about handcrafting as a part of our everyday living experience. I've got so many stories of friends like that that I've actually acquired through my business of handcrafting and traveling to trade, which is so beautiful. So, the intention, as I said, is to really share with you the journey of being an artisan and what artisan living looks like. And not just in terms of what I make to sell, but what I make that contributes to the magic of my everyday living existence. And so, I hope you enjoy this new playlist. I will endeavor to do as many videos as I can, sharing a variety of different things. I thought it would be really important to also say that the A Life by Design podcast will continue. This is not instead of, this is on top of. And I actually plan to interview more people for that podcast. I will continue to do my weekly episodes. However, I want this playlist to be just a little bit more informal and playful. And I probably should say that actually Helen from Good Hope Pottery is someone I interviewed on that podcast. So I encourage you to go over and listen to that one. I can even include that episode as a video in the end card. And Helen works with her daughter. That's something I didn't say earlier. It's not just Helen who makes the pottery, it's a mother and daughter duo. And through the space that I used to sell on behalf of, she used to run workshops in there. So, and she still runs workshops in our region. So if you're interested in learning how to hand build pottery, another cup that I use regularly, I actually made in one of her workshops, which I got to make myself. And then she did the glazing and firing for that. These are the types of things that really do infuse my days with magic. And that's what I want to really share with you in this playlist. In that commercial space, I actually sold on behalf of nearly 20 people in the end from our region and beyond. And their stories and their journeys is actually a part of what inspired me to start my podcast, because I just really wanted to show. Originally, I had it named as Business to Your Own Beat because there were so many people creating such beautiful products that infused our days with magic and, tucked away in their little workshops and not necessarily being seen by the world unless they put themselves out there. And so I wanted to actually really bring to light all of these people, and not just the people I was selling on behalf of, but people all around the globe who do these things that are truly inspirational and start like working from home in their garage, which the stories are most often starting either in the lounge room or in the dining room or in someone's garage, and building these lives by design that support their well-being and also their income stream. Now, the reason I changed the podcast name to A Life by Design is because I didn't necessarily think it had to be just about business. There are so many elements to what creates a beautiful life, and Artisan Living as a playlist has a focus on that, because you don't have to be earning an income to enjoy from your creations to enjoy the process. Really, you can actually take on handcrafting or even creating, even if that's writing poetry, books, or creating music, as a part of your journey through life and connecting back to your essence. That's what artisan living is really about. It's from what comes from within you that you express outside of you. That creation process is really what artisan living is. And so that's what I want to share with you. So if there is anything that you are curious about, you want to know more about, I encourage you to ask questions, leave a comment, let me know what you're enjoying. This is just the first introductory video to bring up to speed on who I am and what my journey has been so far and how I've got to this point. But what I want to do with you is to take you on the journey forward from here with me and develop a community, with a global community of makers and designers and artisans and writers and musicians and whoever is a creator of something, anything, what adds the magic to our existence. Those creators are the ones that I really want to connect with and just share that process with. So, and if you're not a maker and you're here enjoying these videos, you're welcome too. It's not an exclusive community, but I just wanted to open up a new space to connect. And I feel like this would be a really good way to do it, to actually show you in action what I'm working on and yeah, the experimentation I go through, and even share some of the learnings from what I have experimented with in the past. So enjoy this journey with me, and I look forward to being back here in the next video with you, and wish you a magical day or night wherever you are in the world.